Let's wait. Hold on. Celine, are you sharing the screen? Are you sharing the slides?
No, but I can share it if you want.
Hold on, I think there's something on the slides and your screen is a bit broken. All right. Okay. So we'll just start anyways. Right. Okay. So welcome to Introduction to Python. Again, I'm Seth, and my partner there is Celine. Right. Okay. Wait. Let me see. I can't get the slides to move. All right. Okay. So we'll be covering 6 things about Python today. So there'll be a syntax, data types, integer rated option operators and functions, as well as string rated operators and functions, string sizing, and Ifl statements. So I'll be covering the first 3. While Sunny will be covering the last 6. Last 3. Sorry. Okay, so there'll be a collab file or document which allows you to code and try a bit of some of the practices and questions that will be given out. So you can scan the QR code or type in the link and follow the instructions there to set up your collab. So I'll give you some time to try that now. Okay, when you go into collab, the first 2 cells you need to run it to download a file and then upload the file to collab. The file is so that you can check the answers and tell you if you're correct. Give you all a few more minutes to try and get it set up. If anyone has difficulties, do let us know in the chat. So far, only one person has raised up their hand. So if you're done with setting up the collab, do raise up your hand. So you just go to reactions in Zoom, or sorry, participants, and then you can raise up your hand from there. Still about half of the people who still not done, so we'll give them a bit more time. So just type in the link in your browser and then set up the collab file. And raise up your hand once you're done.
Hi guys. So the collab file has changed. Can you please open this new one? The link here. We'll give you a bit more time to set up. Yeah, sorry.
For this one, there should be new instructions in the slide, in the collab file where it should tell you what to do. So just follow instructions there, and again, raise up your hand once you're done. So I'll give you like maybe like another 5 more minutes to try this.
Guys, by the way, the new collab file can be found in the chat, so you can download it. We'll start at 7:20. Yeah. If you have any issues, feel free to private message either me or Seth, or just directly put in the chat. It's also okay.
Okay, so we'll be moving on to the first part of the presentation. Okay, so we'll be talking about the syntax, Python syntax. Okay, so the first thing about Python is that indentation in Python matters. What indentation is spacing. So usually in Python, there are certain blocks that of code that are indented, and the standard is usually one tab, the tab button in keyboard. So usually the standard spacing is one tab for after each line of code, certain lines of code. Sorry. One example of this would be Ifl statements. So after Ifl statements, the next line of code would be indented. So then only those codes that are indented will be run under the Ifl statements. So as you can see, it defines the code. So only what it means is that the only code that is indented is defined as part of the if statement. And colons are used after functions. So some example of functions is again if statements, for or while loops. So you put a colon after those statements. So Salim will be showing some examples of this. She'll be sharing her Visual Studio Code to show you the Python stuff. Okay, so just know that this code won't actually run. It won't actually run. Okay, but you know that after the if statement, the if x equals to 4, there's a colon, and for the else statement, there's also a colon. And the print statements after the if and else, each of them is indented. So what this means is that the print x statement is for if x equals to 4, you only run when if x equals to 4 is true. So in a way, it kind of belongs to the if x is 4. So that print x is what will run when if x is equals to 4 is true. Then the print y will be everything else when x is not equals to 4. So if it isn't indented, if the print x statements or print y statements are indented or there isn't a colon, Python will give you an syntax error and the code won't run. So for example, in this case, the print y statement isn't indented and it will not run. So this is one of the proper syntax where it is indented. Also note that the print x and print y statements, the indentation is the same, and the if or else statements are not indented. That is also important because if not, there'll be syntax error where there will be unexpected indent or something else. So do keep it standardized where the indentation is. In this case, it will be 1. Okay. Okay, so the hashtag or the will be used to denote comment. A comment is will not be run by Python, so it's not code. It can be used to explain or give some small notes in the code. So you put this at the start of whatever you type that isn't meant to be run by Python. Okay. So in Visual Studio Code, in this case, the comments are green. So you note that the hashtag is before the comment, and whatever and that line, that text is not actually code. Um it's just for your own reference. So coders, like I said, will use it as notes to remember stuff, or sometimes it's used to better explain what something is doing. Okay, so in the first example, in the second cell, it says print 4. So that's not comment, that's actual code because there isn't a hashtag. So it runs and it prints the number 4. And the second cell, the cell actually ran, but there's no output because it's a comment and it's not, and Python doesn't see its code, it doesn't run. Okay, again, capitalization matters for the functions or for your variables that you create. So if say you create a variable with a small letter x or small letter y, and if you it will be different from some a variable with capital letter x, capital letter y. And early on, if you saw the the print line, the print was capital P, small letter p. Everything was small letters. If you use capital letter P, you will not run, and you output an error because there is no print capital P. Okay, as you can see, Celine defined P a variable as 4. So that's the print small letter. That's small letter P. And after that, there's two print statements. One is small p and one is big P. So as you can see, the first one ran the first one outputted 4. And after that, there's an error. So the error is that name P is not defined. What it means that there is no variable with capital letter P, and it points to the fourth line of code, which is the one with the capital letter P. This is because there is as you can see, like in none of the cells, there's a capital letter P variable defined. So, and like I said before, the capitalization matters. So a small letter p and a big letter p variable is different. And because it doesn't exist, Python cannot run it. It is not defined. It doesn't exist. Okay. Okay, now we're going through the data types in Python. Okay, first is float. Float is numbers that have decimal points. So some example would be pi or e, which are real numbers that have decimal points. You can convert other data types into floats using the float command, and you put what you want to be converted to a float within the brackets. Do note you can only convert, for example, strings. Sorry, not strings. You can convert strings that is only numbers within it, or integers or Boolean values. However, if your string contains text like with letters in it, you will not be able to convert to float. Okay, integer values are numbers without decimal points. So you can convert other data types to integer. Again, the same will apply where if it is a string, you want to convert a string to integer. The string can only contain numbers. And if you convert a float or a string where the string contains, the number in the string has decimal points, you round the number from the float or the string, you round it down. If you convert Boolean to float integer, true is 1 and false will be 0 if you use the int or float to convert them. So now Celine will demonstrate this in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so in this case, P is an integer, Q is a float value, ST is a string, ST1 is also a string. Okay, so as you can see, the string ST only has numbers in it, while ST1 has letters and numbers. Do know that a string, when you define a string, it has to have quotation marks. So that will make it a string. Okay, you see when you do float P, it adds a decimal 0 because um initially it's integer, so it does not have decimal. When you convert it to float, it gives it a decimal point to make it a floating number. And when you make okay, when for the second print statement, print integer string, it prints 1, 2, 3. And do note that there's no quotation mark, so it is not a string. If you do type integer string, it will show you as integer and not string. Whereas if you do type string, you'll output as string. The type will be a string. Okay. When you see for the third one, the third print statement, print integer q is 3, and like I mentioned before, it will round it down. So it went from 3.14, which is a float, to integer 3. For the fourth print statement, you outputted an error, value error. That's because it cannot convert letters to numbers. As for again, for the float string, it also won't work because you cannot convert letters to numbers as well. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, strings are text. Uh, Text also includes numbers, and it also includes numbers with it. So when you denote a string, you have to use quotation marks, whether double quote or single quotes. You can convert other data types to string. So when you convert floats or integers to string, you will just put you. It will seem like you just put quotation marks between the between your values, but there will be a difference that will be brought up later between a string or string integer and float numbers. You can Boolean values are true, false, true or false. Do know that there's capital T and capital F for true and false respectively. Um, okay, and there's no quotation marks. That it is not a string. If you do quotation marks between for the true and false, it is a string and not a Boolean value, and it is different. You can convert data types to Boolean values using bool. So one float or integer of one will be true, float or integer zero will be Boolean false. Also, empty strings are none types. Do note that. Sorry, not empty strings. Nothing. Empty will be num type. Okay, so the last two statements show what it means is that true. Okay, double equals is checking if it's equal. Two equal signs will be if it is equal. Okay, one equal will be used to define variables. Okay, so print true equals to one, it outputs true. What this means is that true is one. And as for false equals to zero, it means that false is zero. So if you do print, okay, if you do print boolean one, it will output as true. And if you do print boolean zero, it will output as false. Okay, go and try that right now. We'll be trying that right now. Okay, so what this did is converted 1 and 0 to boolean values. And as you can see, 1 is true and 0 is false. Okay, like I mentioned, Boolean can be converted into integers. So earlier on, we converted integers to a Boolean value. It can work the other opposite way around. We can convert true into 1 and false to 0. Okay. Variables are used to substitute value with variable name. As you saw earlier, we did p equals to some value, and st equals to the string 123, and st1 is building box. So those are variables that the string and the string one are variables. And so usually you will use variables to substitute the actual type. Like you saw earlier when we did string or integer, we converted string and integers into other forms. We didn't type out the actual string itself. We used the variable instead. We used the variable name instead. You can use comma to declare multiple variables at the same time. And Celine will show this now. So you can see here that PQ, ST, and ST1, we use one line code one line of code for each variable. But here we did a comma b comma c equals to 0 comma 1 comma 2. So a will be equals to 1, b equals to a equals to 0, sorry, b equals to 1, and c equals to 2. So the either of the cells, either of these ways to declare variable works. You can do it in one line, or you can do it in 3 lines. So you print them out, it'll be 0, 1, and 2. Okay. Yeah, so you can see that it is exactly the same and both works. So it's up to you to choose which style you like. But it's just something to take note of, that it saves a bit of space in a way if you use one line instead. Now we'll be talking about integer operations and functions. So this will be more of the math side of things. Okay, so again, math operators. So addition is the plus symbol, subtraction is the minus symbol on your keyboard. Do note it's the minus symbol and underscore and not underscore. Multiplication is asterisk, division is forward slash. Okay, these are the normal math operators that you should be familiar with. Okay, remainder of modulo is the percent symbol. What this gives is that when you try to divide a value, you divide the value, but the output will be the remainder. So say you do 4 divided by 3, you give the answer will be 1 remainder 1. And okay, that's bad. Sorry, 5 divided by 2, for example, it will be 2 remainder 1. If you do modulo, the percent symbol, the answer will be 1. And if you do quotient, which is 2 forward slashes together, no space, the answer will be 2 for the 5 quotient 2. The answer for that will be 2. Power is 2 asterisks, and um, I think Celine will show the operators now in Visual Studio Code. As I mentioned earlier, the percent gives the remainder when five divided by 2 will be again 2 remainder 1. So the remainder is 1, and the quotient is 2, and power will be 2 power 3 would give 8. So okay, so the round function round floating point numbers. So you will output an okay, you can output either an integer or float. So okay, so the number is the floating around. So what you do, you'll be round, and then within the brackets you put the number, and optionally you can do comma the number of decimal points you want. So the default is 0. So what it means is that you round it off to an integer. And Celine will now show how you can use the round function to round it off to either integer or float. Okay, the output for that will be 3. So like I mentioned, it defaults to 0 decimal places. So it'll give you a whole number integer. Okay, for the second one, the comma 2 means that you round off to 2 decimal places. You round off to 50.12, you're coming to 2 decimal places, which is 50.12. Okay, now Celine will be going through the string related operators and functions.
Hey, hi guys. Congrats for making it this far. Yay! So, um, so basically we're going to continue with string related operators and functions. So there are a couple things you can do with strings when it comes to Python. The first one you can do is the input function. So what the input function is basically you're asking the user for input. let's say you want the user to put in a value for you to use later. So you can only put a string in the brackets. Usually what you do with this string is that you ask a question like, or maybe put in a number, which I will demonstrate later. And the data you will get will always be a string type. So let's say if you want an integer data type, for example, you'd have to convert that. Okay, so if you look at my screen, okay, so what happens here, the console is up here, by the way, if it's not really visible, do tell me. But so what I've asked this code to do is I want the user to give me a number and I'll assign that number to the letter X. So let's say I put 5. Then it will print 5, which is basically what I inputted. So, but then if you check, this will be a string type, not an integer type. Yep. Um, I'll be demonstrating again one more time for clarity. Okay, so let's say I do 67. Let's say I enter 67. So it shows that it will return 67, but again, this string will be, it will return as a string. It won't return as an integer, even though it looks like it's an integer. So moving on, you also have the print function. So this will output either your strings, your floats, or your integers. And you can use variables that you have declared to substitute the actual value. So we've done this a couple of times already, where we've assigned X the input of the data earlier, and then we just tell them to print X. So this is one way you could do it. Yeah. Moving on, we also have length function, or in other words, you can write it as length. So this will return the length of the string. And you have to note that this will count all the characters inside the string. So I'll be demonstrating it. Building. So when I tell Python to return the length of the string for S, which is this line here, it will return to me 3 because there are 3 characters that are inside it. If I ask them to return Q, it will count all the characters in here. And R, I'll change the string so it's easier to see also. It becomes 17 because this will count the space in here. So this is helpful to know because in certain cases in your code, you might want to count the, or find where the space is. So that's why it's helpful. Okay. So before we carry on, we have a challenge for you to try. So if you go into your Colab, there should be a component for you, or at least a workspace for you to try out the challenges. If you have not tried out the questions we provided for you there, you can try them at your own time, or you can try them now. So here's the first challenge you'll be doing.
Right?
Hmm.
Only $20. That's $20.
Okay, so
Okay, we'll give you a bit of time now to try out the tasks. Okay, so if you can see in Colab, there's a few tasks that let you experiment and play around with the string type. So those are some questions where you need to perform some tasks as explained there. So if you run the cell, if it gives you a true, means that you got the answer correct, and if you give a false, if the answer is wrong. If you do have any questions, do type in the chat, or you can ask us. So this challenge here on the screen right now is for you to code and code the objectives as shown over there. So we'll let you code it now, and later we'll be going through the some sample or example code that we have. And if you have any questions, you can ask it later, or you can just message us in the chat now.
don't worry, I'll be doing the code alongside with you. Yeah.
Okay, just to note, there's something called string concatenation, which is when you can add strings together. So in this case, for the challenge one, when you need to print a greeting, you can you can create a new string with with different sections inside. So for example, you want to add their name to hello, you can do like hello plus their name, plus the name. So you can do print, then within a bracket you can do like bracket hello, then plus the plus symbol, and then their name, the name variable. So you can do like, you can use the input function to get the name or whatever you're trying to do. Also, do know that both has to be strings when you add them. They both have to be string type, and you cannot add a string to an integer. If you're done with coding it, do raise your hand, and we'll be going through when majority of the people has done it. Or if you do face an error and you can't resolve it, I think you should raise your hand too, so at least we know you tried, and then we'll go through it. And if you have any questions, like on say any errors you're facing, do type in the chat, or unmute and let us know. And if you're done with it, do try the optional if there's some extra time. Okay, so we'll be going through the code right now, and I will be sharing my screen. Okay. So, some people has messaged me regarding some errors that they. Oh, hold on, let me try and share it. Okay, so can you see the? Okay, so some errors I noted is that somebody tried to do input x. Hold on. Some people tried to do was x equals to input. Just enter something. Okay, as just for example. So then say I enter like 20. So x, sorry. Then what they tried to do was print. They wanted to print x as in the variable x, but they did this. And if I run this and I enter 20, again the console's up there. You print x. The thing is that when you do this, when you do a bracket, it means it's a string. So this means it's printing the string with x in it. And even and this is a variable and this isn't a string. So what you want to do instead, when you want to do a variable, is just print x without the quotation mark. So it is not a string. In this case, if I enter 20 again at the top here, you print the value 20 instead. So if, again, here is quotation marks, means that it is a string, and whereas this is a variable which is defined over here in this case. Okay, so this is the sample code. So I'll be going through it right now. So name, age, and school, they are defined via the input. So when I run it, give me a moment. Right, forgot the syntax error. Right, back to it again. So again, you ask for your name. So I'm Seth, 17. I'm from YGC. And okay, you know what? Later. So, hold on, some slight errors. Right. So when I do this, the variable name would be Seth. The age, when I enter this, how old are you? As you can see the question here, the age will be 17 as I enter it above. And here's the output. So if I run, I'm not sure if you can see the variables. Oh, never mind. Okay. So if I do print name, should be Seth. So why earlier on when I entered it as Seth, it defined the name as Seth and the age would be 17 and the school will be YGC. So here I'm adding up the various strings to make my greeting. So hello is a string, there is the quotation marks. And then my name, I'm adding my name in, and then after that from school and exclamation mark. So this is the string concatenation. The plus is used to add strings. Also note that there is a space here because there's no space in the name, and without this space, the hello and Seth will be one word. Okay, this is the optional part where you're supposed to give the user's age in 7 years. Okay, so this is the main part where it calculates how old the person will be 7 years. So it takes the age and adds 7 years to it, but I have to convert the age into an integer first, which earlier on I forgot to do. As mentioned before, the input is always a string, and you cannot sum strings and integers together. It cannot add it mathematically. So I have to convert it to an integer, and then it adds it, and then convert it to a string again, so that you can print it. Because you cannot, because what you're trying to do is print out a string, and you want to add the strings together, so into to form one sentence. And you cannot add, because this is a string, the you will be and the years old in 7 years is both are string type. So when you want to add this has to be a string type in order for it to work. And if I don't do that, if I do not make it into a string first, it should not be able to run. Yeah, it can only concatenate string and not integer to string. What it means, it cannot add a string and integer type together. So after adding the after adding my age in 7 years, I have to convert it to a string type.
Okay, so I'll be taking over again. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so uh, another function you can do when it comes to string, we're coming back, is called the upper function. So what this function does is that it will return a string where all the characters are in uppercase. You do need to note though, like symbols like your exclamation mark, your apostrophe, and your space, they will be ignored, as well as your numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you look at the code over here, the one that I'm selecting, so I put two strings. One is called test, which is low caps. Test one is I'm in low caps. So what happens is when I put test.upper and test1.upper, when I run it, you can see that it has changed from lower capital to big capital now. Yeah. Yeah. Aside from that, you can also do the opposite from upper function, which is lower function. So it's basically the same thing except reverse. So all the characters will be in lowercase when you apply the dot lower function. And again, all symbols and numbers will be ignored. So let's say in my Visual Studio Code here, I've changed test one to big caps. And test one this is in big caps now, y'alls. So if I do test.lower and test1.lower, it will return as small caps now. So as you can see, the big caps that was in capitalization, that are capitalized, are now not capitalized anymore. Yeah. Okay, so aside from the string functions that we've introduced to you right now, there are additional things that you can do, and you might use them in your code in certain cases. So what we're going to teach you next is called string slicing. So basically, the first thing you need to know when it comes to string slicing is that in Python, indexing is very important because let's say in your strings or whatever data types you'll be facing in the future, they will all come in an index. So how you normally index them is, let's say I have a word Python, as you can see in this screen. Normally you'd count that as, oh, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in Python, the first character is 0, as you can see here, the green font. So P in Python would be 0, Y would be 1, T will be 2, and so on. And this is if you want to count from left to right. But if you want to count from right to left, as stated here, the first character is -1. So when you count from right to left, let's say you want to start with n, you'll start with -1 over here. And if you, let's say, you want to find p, but you want to count from right to left, then you have to count. N is -1, O is -2, H is -3, T is -4, and so on until you reach P, which is -6. Yeah. Okay. So in string slicing, what it does is that it will slice the strings. I'll be showing you a sample of it pretty soon. So string slicing, basically, it has a format, which is the variable. Let's say if you assign a variable A, for example, the string hi, then it will be that string that they will slice. And the first part here is start. This is where you tell Python where you want them to start slicing the string, which index or character that you want them to look at. Okay, so So let's say here, I have the string. Hello. So if I tell them to start here, which is 1, it will only print from E onwards. Now, usually, right, when I put 1 colon, that would show start to stop over here. Stop will automatically be set to the very last character that you have, and start will automatically be in the first character if you did not assign any index for them to see. So let's say I change it up. I want them to see from the first index. I only want L, for example, ELL, and I don't want H, I don't want O. So what I do is H is index 0, so I will be ignoring this, and I'll tell them Python start at 1. And I don't want O to be in the output. So I tell them ignore 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. So it will return as ELL. And then next in Python, you also have step. Step is special because it tells them like if you want to skip anything. So for example, hold on. Okay, so what I'm telling Python to do here in this line of code is that I wanted to start at H, which is the first character, and end at the last character. But I want them to step at 1. So what it will return is this. Sorry, I'll change it to 2 so it's easy to see. Yeah. So when I change it to 2, then it will skip the E that's over here, and it will skip the L that's over here. So it will only return the H, the L, the first L, and the O over here. Yeah. So basically, to recap, the logic flow is that start will tell Python which index the string slicing begins. Stop will tell Python when to stop, and step is how it goes to the string. So we've prepared for you another challenge for you to try out string slicing. So basically, the objective is we've given you these 3 strings, and we want you to take with concatenation as well. Basically, what concatenation is that you combine the strings with plus to get the strings super, frags, and cauliflower. So we'll give you time to yes, do this challenge. Yeah, if you face any issues, by the way, you can always chat us or unmute. Yeah.
Do raise up your hands once you're done. And where is he? We.
I'll give you another 1-2 minutes, then we'll go through the code as well. Let's say if you like are stuck, you can also raise up your hand. Yeah. Or you can PM us the questions. Okay, so it's been 2 minutes. I'll go through the live coding right now. Okay, so as you can see here, so y'all were given this three strings, right? Sunflower, building blocks, and this very cursed long string. Um, so basically, let's say the first one you want to find super. You want to find super, right? So the first thing you do is you can find super here in this string in supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, which is in variable z. So what I'll do is that I'll ask Python to look at the variable z, and I'll tell them to start at the first index, which is index 0. And I'll tell them to stop at index 5, which is here at r. So this will return me super. Next, we want to find the word frags here or here. So in frags, you can see that there's frag, which is the first four letters in frag in Z. And you can basically take S either from X, which is the first one, S here, or in any part here. So what I did is I told Python to look at Z first, which is this variable, this long string. And I told them, okay, start at index 9. Yes, here, somewhere around here. And then I want them to stop at index 13, which is here at G. But then if let's say I only print this out, let's say, this will only return to me frags. And then I'm looking for a S. So how do I get this S over here? So what I can do is I can do string concatenation, or I can add a string, and I can just tell Python to just pick out just one letter. So when you want to look for one letter, you can do this, which is in this case, I'm telling them to look at this very long string again, but I tell them that, hey, I only want this one string, one character, which is S. So I tell them, okay, because S is in the 0 index, I only want 0. So then this will return me your S. Ta-da! Yeah, it's gone now. But anyways, then you can do a similar thing for cauliflower, because here you can see that, okay, there is no exact word that says cauli. There's only cali. There's a U here in X, and there is flower here. So basically in this line of code over here, when I want to take cauliflower is that I tell Python to see this long line again, only take CA this time, only take CA. And then I tell them, because I need a U, and U can only be found in here in X. So I tell them, okay, X, because I know that U is in the first index, just take the character at the first index in the variable X, and so on and so forth with Z and X. Yes, so this is one way to get cauliflower. There may be other ways that are also correct. So yeah. Okay, so we've reached one of the last parts in this workshop. Yay, congratulations, give yourself a pat in the back. So next up, I'm going to be teaching you if-else statements. So usually when it comes to programming, at least in my experience, we've been using these a lot. So this will come in very, very handy. Okay, so if-else statements is basically your conditions set. Let's say you only want code to run if a certain condition is met. So if-else statements will only run if the conditions under it return as true. So there are some condition operators that you can use. Some of them, this is not a very extensive list, but these are just some of them that you can use. You can use more than, less than, not equal to. Do note, because we don't have, normally not equal to would be this sign over here. Yeah, but because you can't write that in Python, so it is an exclamation mark equals. Equals to, now do note, one mistake that you might encounter is that normally you do equals instead. You will give you time to like try that out later. But basically what happens is if let's say, let me show you in here. So let's say if x is equals to 4, let's say I make this error. Oops. This will be an invalid syntax because you're not telling Python that, hey, I want you to check whether this x is equals to 4 or not. So this will be an error that usually you make. So you have to be very careful in this case. So what I want to do here is I add another equals and ta-da, it will return 4. Okay, so that's one thing you have to look out for when it comes to setting conditions. Another one is more than or equal to, less than or equal to, which you might be using later. Okay, so for if-else statements, there are several operators that you can use to set conditions, which is and, or, and they are Boolean operators. Yeah, so what they do is that they take 2 or more Boolean values as an input, and then it will give one output, sorry. So the OR function is when you're using the OR function, either one or both conditions must return as true for the code to run. Okay, so let's say I have this code. X is equals to 4, y is equals to 60. Yeah. So if x is equals to 4 and or y is equals to let's say 60, I want them to print correct. So this code runs because x, if you check it, okay, this code runs, this code over here runs, because x, as you can see, x is equals to 4, that returns as true, and y is equals to 60, that returns as true. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that you need to have either one or both to return as true for the code to run. So let's say I changed x. X is now 10. So as you can see, x is not equals to 4. So this will return as false. So this part over here will be false. But y is still equals to 60, and this returns as true. So in this case, you have both like false and a true as an output, a Boolean output. So what the OR function will do is that it will ignore the false and it will just look at the true, and it will continue to print on correct anyway. But okay, now that we've seen that, let's say both of them are wrong now. Okay, so now I've changed x is equals to 10 and y is equals to 50. So it's no longer equal to 4, no longer equal to 60. So what happens is that this will return both a false and a false. When this happens, if you put the OR function, it will just, it won't run this part of the code, and it will directly go to else, and it will print wrong, as you can see here. Yeah. So basically, if R is the very lenient cousin, now you have AND, which is very strict. So what AND function does is that it uses, when you use the function, both conditions have to return as true for the code to run. So again, in this case, let's say I return it to 4 and I return it to 60. I change this part to be N. So both of these will return as true. And because these both return as true, Python will run this line of code over here because it passes the condition set. Now, what if I change x to become 10? As you can see, this will now return as false. So Now that this is returned as false, the conditions will now return a Boolean output of false and true. And because n function wants both conditions to be true, they will not run this part of the code, which says print correct. And instead, it will directly go to the else and print wrong. Likewise, this also occurs if you, let's say, I change it now to 70. Now they both return as false and they don't run any line of code. Okay, so now we've come to the last part of the challenge, or this part of the workshop. So our last challenge for you would be this NS challenge. So what we want you to do is that we want you to ask the user for their gender, their age, and their nationality. And you need to determine whether the user has to go to NS or not. The optional part would be you need to include the year they need to serve and be able to accept various variations of the user input. Ignore the typo over here. But yes, this is optional if you feel very confident already. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to do this now. I'll be coding alongside with you. So if you are confused, you can look up to the screen. Yeah.
Wait, just so for those who don't know, the requirements to go to NS is 18, Singaporean or PR, and male. 18 years old. And by different variations, we mean like the thing is this: when you code, right, the user, when the user interacts with code, there might be the input that the user gives is not set. So the user may give male, female, as in spelled out, capital M, F. So there are different various ways to account for this. So that's optional lah. And that's what we mean by different variation.
Okay, I'll give y'all 1-2 more minutes to try the questions, and then after that, I'll be going through the code. Yeah. Okay, so I'll be going through the code with you. Yeah. Okay, so just to recap, the objective that we're doing in this challenge is one, to ask the user's gender, age, and nationality, and to two, determine whether they have to go to NS. So if you see in my line of code over here, the one that I'm selecting, so basically what I've done is I've asked the user to input their gender, their age, and their nationality, and I've assigned them to variables X, Y, and Z respectively. So when I run this code, Python will now prompt me to put in. So let's say I put, okay, I'm male, I am 18 years old, and I am Singaporean, for example. Then, because all conditions return as true in this line of code over here, Python will then run this indented code and will return, you have to go to NS. But then, because I want them to check whether I have to go to NS or not, let's say now I put in, okay, I am female, I am 16, and I am not Singaporean, for example. Let's say I am Indonesian. So then returns as a false, false, false. You don't have to go to NS. Okay, so this is one way to do it, and I'll be going to the optional as well. So in the optional, this is not an extensive list. You might be a bit more stricter with this, but for me, this is one way you can go about it. So now I've done the same thing. I've asked Python to ask for the input for the gender, age, and nationality, and assign them to X, Y, and Z respectively. So now let's say my gender is male, and then I am 19 years old, then I am Singaporean, for example. Oh dear. Sorry. Then this will because all this returns as true. Then it will return as you have to go to NS. So then after that, Elif, basically, this is an extra thing. Elif is basically else if. So you don't, let's say you want to set more than one condition instead of if else, you can add another condition below that. So let's say if this returns as false, but you want them to check again to see whether this one is correct or not. You can do Elif over here, which is short for Elif. So let's say now I'll try to get the Elif correct, okay? I'm male, I am 16, for example, and I am Singaporean. Then it will return as, you don't need to go to NS now, but I will be serving in 2 years. Yeah. And basically what else does in the end is, let's say for X, I am female. And then after that, I am 16, for example. And my nationality is Indonesian again. Then it will return as you don't have to go to NS. Yeah. So this is one way to approach the question. Of course, there are many variations out there that you would have done, but as long as it gets the output there, that should be okay. Yes. Okay. So we've come to the end of this workshop. Woo, congratulations. Now we're holding a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for us, you can either unmute your mic or you can private message us or put in the chat. Then either one of us
Yep.
will attend to questions.
Yep. If you can either message everyone or just message us privately. It's both are fine. Okay. Normally, okay, for Boolean, I find myself using it more in Ifl statements and while loop statements. Okay, so far we didn't cover while statements here in this particular workshop, but okay, so what while statements are is it will loop through. So okay, the question is in what context do we use Boolean, and for information, Boolean is the true or false. Okay, and so you usually, so say for while, you can do like stuff like while x is 4, or while x is true. Say x is a variable where say you're taking user input, or it's some operation that, or some function. So you want to iterate through, you want to keep on running a certain set of code multiple times, and you can do this by having a variable x which is true, which will run the code when it's x is true. So I mean, and then you set it to false when, say, certain conditions are met. So that's one way of using Boolean values. But Boolean values is also, in a way, it's kind of how do I put this? It's, I mean, there's way to substitute out stuff instead of using Boolean values, um like for that while loop. You need not use a Boolean value. You can use like another way to check if x is to check for your x variable. But most of the time you use it when you're comparing stuff, so that, like for example, the if statements. Because when you compare, like, when you compare x equals to, if you do like print x equals to 4 when x is 4, it'll give you true. Python will automatically output as a Boolean value. So when you're running if statements, sometimes you need to use Boolean values to compare, instead of instead of your own values. I'm not sure if you can understand what I'm saying. It's a bit confusing, I guess. Does that answer your question? Or maybe Celine can try explaining, because I think that was a bit confusing. Ah, I see. Okay then.
Okay, are there any other questions for us? We'll give you one till let's say 8:55. If you have any questions you want to ask us, you can ask us again. Either unmute yourself, you can PM us, or you can just directly put in the chat. Yeah.
So okay, there's another question. How many different things can you import into Python? You can import turtle. What do you mean by how many different things can you import? Like import as in libraries, you can import like as many libraries as you actually need. And somebody said you can import turtle. Just to just a brief explanation of what turtle is. It allows you to draw graphics. You so if you do it's called turtle graphics. It's an external library. It and you can use Python itself to set variables on how turtle works. So it kind of in a way it's a library that you import lah. So when you say how many different things you can import in Python, it's actually unlimited lah. It's more of how much can your system handle more than what more than a Python limitation in itself. Because if you can store unlimited libraries if you have the space to download the libraries within your computer, you can import them. I, I find importing math quite useful into so math library, okay, earlier on we covered some of the more basic math functions. So there's a library called math, and again you can do that by importing math, and it will give you various options like sine, cosine, tangent, arcsine, and other various like pi, e, log functions as well. So you can go explore that. There, I'm sure that actually I think we're covering that in another workshop that we're doing, and of course you can go and read up yourself about the math library, or you can do like help math within Python itself. You can run help math. Okay, so we got another question, Sen, that is whether user-defined functions are going to be taught in the workshop. Yes, there is a Python 3.9 workshop. This is the intro. So we'll be teaching functions as well as recursive functions in that workshop. So yes, we are going to teach it. And yeah.
Okay, so just to touch on the import math, returning to that question before. Okay, so basically what you can do is, um, I hope you can be able to see my screen right now, but basically what I've done is basically just import math and then you can do this. And it should be able to return you the very, very long list of what you can do with math.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to explain more. So you have to import the math library before that. You have to import any library that is external. So so the functions you can see earlier. So what it means is that okay, you can see the first one is arccos, acos. Okay, that's a math function. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it, but okay, that's cosine there, which is cos bracket. So okay, so what it means is that okay, so there's a list of the various functions in there, and it teaches you how to use it as well as a brief explanation. So this help not only can be done on math, you can do help print help of any function or library within math, and you'll give you the built-in module help within the library itself or the module. So in this case, you see it says a cos x. What it means that you put in the value x that you want to get the cosine, or in this case, a cos of arc.
Yeah. So basically when you do help math, then it will return to you the functions and basically a description of how you can use it. Like for example, a cosh will return the inverse hyperbolic cosine of x and so on and so on. Yeah.
Wait for idle. Okay, for idle, for any you can need. It's actually up to you to you on what kind of ID you what kind of developing environment you use. In this case, for the demo, me and Celine use Visual Jupyter running within Visual Studio Code. So it's up to you what kind of if you're more familiar with idle, yeah, sure you can use it. But using Collab is because it allows us to format it before we send it to you. So yeah, for like and for the spaces we give for you to code your own things, of course you can use idle in place of that, where you can expand it in idle. That works too. Um, for those who don't know, idle is the Python's one of the developing integrated developing environment. Sorry. So you can use either 3.9. 3.9 should be fine for the workshops that we're conducting, because what we are teaching should be quite in a way quite standard, and there's not much changes to what we're teaching between the versions. You use 3.6, yes, that's fine, because for JC level computing we're actually taught on 3.6. So 3.6 and 3.9, for what, like I said, what we're teaching, there's not much difference. So it is fine to use 3.6 now. 3.6 or 3.9, both. 3.9 is the latest version. So if for those who are downloading IDLE as well as Python, you can download 3.9 and that will be fine, even though what we are learning is 3.6, because um the changes are quite minute as far as we're concerned.
Basically to just recap, you don't need to worry for the next workshop, like whether you're doing 3.9 or 3.6, because we'll be able to help you with those. Yeah. Are there any more questions? I think we can take a few more questions. Okay, so if there are no more questions, thank you so much for coming to this workshop. So if you have any questions that, like, let's say you didn't get a chance to text or whatnot, you can always contact us either via email or via our GitHub. Yeah. So I'll be passing